for joining, everybody. My name is Amani Ahuja, and I'm a second year law student at Jindal Global Law School. And I'd really like to thank all of you for taking our precious time from different time zones across the globe and joining us today for our inaugural lecture on the topic Human Rights and the Rule of Law, Practical Experiences, Challenges, and Responses. Without taking much of your time, I'd like to invite Mr. Jitendra Sharma, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India, to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you, Amani. On behalf of Commonwealth Lawyers Association, America's Hub, and Society of Lawyers of India, I welcome you all on this first inaugural lecture on the topic Human Rights and Rule of Law, Practical Experience, Challenges, and their Responses. The attempt of this society to go for a lecture is a dedication to SOLI Swarajji, a great lawyer practicing mainly in Indian jurisdiction, but who was well known throughout the all Commonwealth jurisdictions. He was a great lawyer. He was a philanthropist. He was a music lover. Interestingly, he was president of Jazz Society of India, and above all, a human rights activist. He had an opportunity to, his services as a lawyer was used by the government of India for 2 terms as an Attorney General, and for 1 term he remained as a Solicitor General. And keeping his activity and his long associations with the work on human rights, the government of India recognized him by awarding him a Padam Vibhushan, which is the 2nd highest honor in the civil honor. His association with Commonwealth is well known for a very long time. Those who are associated with Commonwealth, the Lawyers Association, they are aware that his activities were long on since very long. And he has been conferred the honor of having an honorary permanent president of Commonwealth Lawyers Association. Now, he being a great human right activist, the society SOLI, which is Society of Lawyers of India, which happens to be a word as a SOLI, abbreviation stands for SOLI. This was formed, which is a dedication. And this is the first lecture. Human rights has been very close to him. In fact, human rights activists, human rights got a legal recognition in the sense after Second World War. And in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it has been, which mentions that the rule of law in the preamble suggests that human rights should be protection by rule of law. So the first connection between human rights and the rule of law came up in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And that's how the process starts of how the human rights are being affected, and they are preserved, and they are protected, and they are going into it, protected through rule of law. Now, in detail, we have got a wonderful speaker, Peter Maynard, and he'll be giving you in details about this topic. And at this moment, I welcome you all to come and visit Goa, where there is a Commonwealth Lawyers Association Conference 2023 is there, and for which there are about almost close to 45 days from today. And this series of lectures, which you will continuously go, with association with CLA as well as the SOLI, the society. They are having with America's Hub, they are going with Australasia and other regions to promote the Goa conference. And I take this opportunity to invite you all to the Goa conference to be held in first week of March, from 5th March to 9th March 2023 at Goa. So I see you all, and I leave the floor for Peter Maynard to have his inaugural lecture. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Amani.
Thank you so very much for those kind words, Jitendra. Mujhe bolne ke udar amantran ke liye dhanyavad. Thank you for the kind invitation to speak. I thank the Society of Lawyers in India, SOLI, in particular Jitendra Sharma, Amani Ahuja, Rohit and Kumar, and of course Santan, and everyone associated with the preparation and staging of this prestigious event. Thanks, Jitendra, for evoking the stellar, courageous, and outstanding spirit of the great jurist SOLI. Congratulations also on the first activity of the Society of Lawyers in India and its registration as a trust. John F. Kennedy once said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." Nelson Mandela said, "Now and then, a generation is called upon to be great. You can be that generation." Mahatma Gandhi once said, "There is a higher court than courts of justice, and that is the court of conscience. Justice and conscience play key roles in the protection and strengthening of human rights and the rule of law, as embodied by Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, and other icons." The Commonwealth Lawyers Association, encompassing some 54 countries of the Commonwealth and about a third of the world's population, has a tremendous potential as a catalyst for change in the global South and the global North. It can seek to turn back despotism and injustice wherever they rear their heads. I divide this talk into 5 parts: my origin story, what is the rule of law, and 7 practical experiences, if you will, or war stories, challenges and responses that face us now, and finally, a brief word on the Commonwealth Law Conference in Goa from the 5th to the 9th of March, 2023. Origins. The history of the Caribbean illuminates the fate of a group of islands whose natural resources, human slavery, and indentured labor made them some of the wealthiest places on the planet, and then into some of the poorest. At the same time, the region was not only one of the most environmentally beautiful and biodiverse places, but also became one of the most ethnically diverse, with different races, religions, and languages. Therefore, it is no surprise that poverty is Sustainable Development Goal 1, and I have made elimination of poverty a focus of my approach to human rights and the rule of law. The CLA stands ready to provide support it can for human rights and the rule of law. It has an impressive track record, as reflected, for example, in the Harare Declaration, the Millbrook Action Plan, the Latimer House Principles on the accountability of and relationship between the 3 branches of government, and the Commonwealth Charter of 2013. We must continue to build that track record. My experience, practice, and passion are replicated among lawyers in different parts of the Commonwealth who deserve your support. I shall shortly give a few examples of my experience in Fiji, East Timor, Haiti, the Philippines, and my own country, the Bahamas, and the region, and shall touch on those countries in a moment. Before continuing, let me say a little about my background. I was born and raised in a lion's den of human rights and rule of law activists. My origin story centers around a strong human rights background through my late grandparents, parents, and my law practice. I was close to my late grandmother, shown on the left, Georgina K. Simonet. She volunteered me to collect a vast number of signatures across the country to petition the government and to grant women the right to vote. She was born in a small family island settlement of Wims's Bight in the Bahamas, in Wims's Bight, Eleuthera, and was raised by her grandmother, just her grandmother, her brother, and herself, after her parents had abandoned them. From those beginnings, she, valuing education and having a spirit of enterprise, owned 2 mom and pop shops, and with that supported various causes, including the right to democracy, the right of women to vote, and an end to racial discrimination. Her and her colleagues, their persistence and determination bore fruit. She referred to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, which states, "It is essential, if man is not to be compelled to have recourse as last resort to rebellion and tyranny and oppression, that human rights should be protected by the rule of law." Next to her is shown my late grandfather, Roland Cumberbatch, a National University of Ireland trained doctor who came to the Bahamas and was determined and did provide the satisfaction of the right to health. He went to the farthest reaches of the Bahamas, to Inagua, Cat Island, and Andros, to provide health services because of a strong conviction of all people to the right to health. And next to him, Meta Davis Cumberbatch. This is the cover of a book I wrote about her. She was called the mother of the arts of the Bahamas because, as a London Royal Academy of Music gold medalist, she nevertheless, in between her recitals at Carnegie Hall and the halls of London, she and cultivated and nurtured the culture of these islands, and is known today as the mother of the arts of the Bahamas. Then next to her, my parents, firstly my mother, who was one of the brave 11 women of the who went from the Bahamas to fight in World War II. She was also the secretary of a trade union. And so she believed strongly in the right to democracy and workers' rights. And then finally, my late father, Sir Clement Maynard, who was the first president of and founder of the Civil Service Union of the Bahamas. He later became the Deputy Prime Minister of the Bahamas because of his success in upholding human rights within the Bahamas and the rule of law. And so that was my den of lions of human rights, and they instilled that passion also within me. Many world constitutions, and nearly all of the Commonwealth constitutions, in their preamble or early provisions, contain a statement on the rule of law. Bangladesh, Dominica, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, South Africa, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Article 14 of the Constitution of India, and paragraph 2 of the preamble of the Constitution of the Bahamas. And so, what is the rule of law? For me, the rule of law is a dynamic and changing concept. No one is above the law. You know of the wonderful little book by Tom Bingham that states that the core of the existing principle is that all persons and authorities within the state, whether public or private, should be bound by and entitled to the benefit of laws publicly made, taking effect generally in the future, and publicly administered in courts. US Supreme Court Justice Kennedy also said, we must find ways to link the rule of law with real progress in improving the condition of humankind. We must have some measures to assure that the vast aid, the work of the NGOs, the work of the law associations like the CLA, have some immediate, visible, tangible return. So that we can make the case for us, law is a liberating force. It's a promise, it's a covenant. It says you can hope, you can dream, you can dare, you can plan, you have joy in your existence, end quote. And so the rule of law in a modern context includes various ingredients, such as limited government powers, eradication of corruption, protection of fundamental rights, open and transparent government, fair regulatory enforcement, and fair civil, criminal, and informal justice. Government powers are defined in constitutional law. Executive government powers are effectively limited by the legislature and by the judiciary. That relationship reflects the checks and balances of the theory of separation of powers, as elucidated, for example, in the Latham House Principles. But government powers are also limited by independent auditing and review. In addition, government officials are sanctioned for misconduct, but also government powers are subject to non-governmental checks, and a transition of power is subject to the law. Anti-corruption is also an ingredient of the rule of law. As an anti-corruption lawyer, I find that enforcement in this area is particularly important. Therefore, government officials are not to use public office for private gain. And that applies to the executive and legislative, but also to the judicial branch, notably the police and military, and indeed the private sector. Civil justice is accessible, affordable, and timely. It is also free of discrimination, corruption, and or improper government influence. To avoid delays, dispute resolution should be used, appropriate dispute resolution. And it should also be fair, accessible, affordable, and effective. Now, prevention is better than cure. Organizations like the CLA play a vital role in instilling a culture of respect for human rights and the rule of law. Turning to some war stories, so to speak. Firstly, Fiji, the Prasad trial. In what has been described as the most important constitutional case in the history of Fiji, Prasad, an Indo-Fijian farmer, shown on the right in this picture, he sadly died in October of last year. But his land was expropriated about the year 2000 without adequate compensation by a civilian government installed and kept in power by the military after a military coup. But Mr. Prasad was not to be denied. He challenged not only the expropriation, but also the legitimacy of the government. And he won. The courageous first instance judge, Gates, later Chief Justice, held in his favor on both matters. In about 2001, I attended as an international observer requested by the Fijian Law Society and the Human Rights Institute to report on whether the appeal was fair. In the end, after a week of argument, the Court of Appeal, in objectively fair proceedings, I found, upheld the first instance judge. Like falling dominoes, the consequences were immediate and went far beyond just restoring Mr. Prasad. The fact that the world was watching made a big difference. The army respected the findings of the Court of Appeal and marched back to the barracks. Democratic elections were held and a democratic government was subsequently established. Until, unfortunately, the army marched out sometime after and took over again. My report was regarded as the template for future trial observations. The point is that this support structure of trial observation was made available for the rule of law. It could be found that independent judges had nothing to fear, and justice was done in the case of Mr. Prasad with far-reaching effects. As a footnote, I should indicate that I was listed as persona non grata in the newly military rule Fiji since 2006, in spite of a painstakingly objective trial observation. But I am encouraged, after the recent democratic change of government in Fiji, that this may be rescinded. I'm thankful to the help of Wiley Clark, the council member for Fiji. In the meantime, I wear that designation as a badge of honor. East Timor. I was chair of the Pro Bono and Access Committee and later assistant treasurer of the IBA, and also chair of one of its two divisions, the Professional and Public Interest Division. Then there were just two divisions of the IBA. And that's a picture of me addressing the meeting at the Dubai meeting. But I worked through the ranks of law organizations, such as the IBA and several others. And in about 2004, I attended an East Timor, the two pictures on the left. East Timor was a very unstable place. It still is to some extent, but the lawyers there wished to organize their profession to carry out the lofty purposes of the bar of upholding independence of lawyers and of the judiciary. The point is that a proactive bar is essential to the rule of law. Therefore, I led a long, intensive training program for lawyers of East Timor on behalf of the Pro Bono and Access Justice Committee and the Human Rights Institute. We cooperated with Avocats Sans Frontières, Lawyers Without Borders. The response was overwhelming, and great progress was made towards the establishment of the Bar Association. Enabling legislation was drafted. A physical office was subsequently established. But in a down among the ups and downs of East Timor, much of the work was destroyed. On the right, Haiti, when I was a legal advisor to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I visited Haiti regarding forced migrations. I made proposals to reduce the extraordinary number of economic refugees and to alleviate their conditions. Later in 2005, I visited Haiti to help prepare a report on the reform of its judicial system. This was before the earthquake and the cholera outbreak in the country. The mission was organized by the International Legal Assistance Consortium, ILAC, of Stockholm, Sweden, which is responsible for helping to restore the rule of law in post-conflict situations. I was a founder director and continue as a member of ILAC. It was striking that judges themselves genuinely attempted to root out corruption, but in any event, simply lacked the resources to carry out their judicial responsibilities properly. Strategic aid was recommended for basic infrastructure, such as providing law libraries for the courts. But a very important result was also the formation of a national network of legal aid lawyers with offices throughout Haiti that for a time made an important contribution. And I hope that network will be strengthened and will be restored and strengthened. Uganda. In 2012, I helped to organize the regional forum in Uganda. Among many other meetings, including the IBA conferences themselves, I also conducted the training of young lawyers. I'm shown there on the left. The Philippines. An important part of my pro bono work over the past 43 years has been to assist abandoned seafarers. For example, last year I assisted 1,486 seafarers in the Crystal Cruise ship's insolvency. The case is continuing, but now we are down to only seven of the 1,486 who have not been paid wages and other sums due to them. In another case, shown in the photograph, in about 2005, more than 100 seafarers, mainly from the Philippines, were abandoned in the Bahamas. I secured their repatriation and found myself in Manila, partly in connection with successfully returning their lost wages and other compensation. About to become an acting High Court Justice, I also used that opportunity to attend the conference held by the then 21st Supreme Court Chief Justice of the Philippines, Artemio Panganiban, now retired. In a nutshell, his thesis was that judges are accustomed to defending liberty, but the rule of law must also support a nation's prosperity, and judges must bear that in mind. There I am shown as a judge of the Supreme Court of the Bahamas. Every country has rule of law problems of its own. Some are more serious than others, but no country should be self-righteous about the rule of law. We have seen the rule of law challenged in the storming of the US Capitol, the Brazilian presidential palace, and in many diverse countries. In addition, appropriate dispute resolution plays an important role in the rule of law. Justice delayed is justice denied. When I sat as a judge in charge of the northern region of the Bahamas, my court completely resolved the backlog of hundreds, if not thousands of cases on the civil side, some going back to the very establishment of the court some 10 or 12 years before. The point is that I did so as the just and timely resolution of disputes is a part of the rule of law. I had the honor to establish the 11th annual ADR and Investment Summit. The logo is shown on the left. It covers Caribbean, Latin America, and other emerging markets, but has been extended to cover Asia and also parts of Africa. The event will take the next one will take place take place on Friday, the 27th of January, 2023, at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's free, And please do register. The registration is available on the website of the CLA. IWAM, I have the honor to chair IWAM, the International and Western Hemisphere Arbitration and Mediation, Adjudication and Mediation Center, to spark a paradigm shift in economic and social development and nation building. IWAM's pedigree is a vast collective effort to uphold the rule of law and uplift economies and societies in a very significant and profound way through ADR, appropriate dispute resolution. Those are some awards, but poverty, justice, and the rule of law. As you heard, I recently had the privilege, as you may have heard, I recently had the privilege to co-edit a book entitled The Poverty, Justice, and the Rule of Law, the report on the second phase of the IBA Presidential Task Force on the Global Financial Crisis. You can download the book completely free, and indeed there is a sequel now to the book. It was designed to obtain the widest distribution. It is unique to find such a broad range of really excellent contributions in a single volume, from pro bono work to labor, from corporate social responsibility to anti-money laundering, from anti-corruption to access to justice, and from austerity to human rights. There are many quotes, including contributions by Muhammad Yunus, also by Matresen, and a variety, and two other Nobel laureates, among other well-distinguished contributors. For example, what can you do about the rule of law in your practice? That is what Brian Horrigan of Australia calls the fundamental question for the legal profession. Many firms and lawyers have significant pro bono practices which make a difference, and data is provided in the book. It is widely recognized that many clients want to do business with firms concerned about the community and community issues. There is now a sequel which is available called the Toolkit, the Lawyer's Toolkit to deal with poverty, justice, and the rule of law, which I commend to you very, very highly. Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, I had the honor to give the keynote address called the Walter Kamba Rule of Law Award event, praising the courageous work in Zimbabwe during the tenure of President Mugabe. I went during that time of President Mugabe and marveled at the work and supported the work that the courageous lawyers were doing, human rights lawyers were doing and are doing in Zimbabwe. Walter Kamba was a courageous lawyer himself and a remarkable academic. I also presented the Walter Kamba Rule of Law Award to Sternford Moyo, who subsequently became the chair of the Human Rights Institute and the president of the IBA. Turning to immediate challenges and responses. In response to the challenges I've mentioned, I suggest the following 10 responses. To dispatch CLA lawyers for strategic litigation monitoring and trial observations, to provide training and technical assistance to bar associations and law societies, three, to engage institutions like the Office of the UN Special Rapporteur in Geneva on the independence of judges and lawyers. 4, to provide special training, networking, and mentoring of young lawyers. 5, to diversify the CLA financial resource base 6, a Women Lawyers Initiative and improving the networking among lawyers. 7, establishing a pro bono institute. I had the privilege of authoring the pro bono declaration of the IBA, which was adopted unanimously in 2008. And there are many things which we can emulate in regarding an institute regarding pro bono work, because there's so many lawyers who would like to have the opportunity through the CLA of doing more pro bono work. 8, strengthening CLA committees, including a rapid response mechanism. 9, preparing amicus curiae briefs. 10, engaging and supporting stakeholders, including CLA partners and law firm regulators. CLC Goa. I am excited about the breadth and depth of the CLC Goa program with the theme Common Challenges in Uncommon Times. Not only does the program highlight today's challenges, but it also provides for calls to action and also on how to face those challenges. In conclusion, I hope you are able to relate to these experiences. If I can do these things, so can each of you. I also hope that you identify with the underlying themes of capacity building, institution building, vigilance, and responding proactively. We must deal with old challenges, but not lose sight of new opportunities. Constitutionalism is important to the rule of law. It is necessary to close the abyss between words and action. One has to avoid wastage of resources, violation of basic rules of governance, a violation of human rights, and failure to adhere to democratic values. To paraphrase Chief Justice Panganiban, history rings out for people's right to be free to live peacefully, to earn a living, to participate in political processes, to vote and to be voted for, as well as to speak, to assemble peaceably for redress of grievances, and to worship one's creator, and to be free from arbitrary arrest, among others. We must ensure there is never any compromise of the ethical foundations on which the profession rests, including upholding the rule of law. We must always strive to secure justice and the rule of law. As stated by Martin Luther King, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So I propose, in the context of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, that lawyers ask not what the CLA can do for you, but ask what you can do for the CLA. Aap sabka mujhe dhyan se sunne ke liye dhanyawad. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maynard, for such an insightful lecture. I totally agree that the heart of rule of law is the idea that no one is above the law, and definitely no one is beneath its protection. And indeed, respect for human rights requires the establishment of rule of law at both international and national level. And on that note, I would now like to open the floor for questions. Our audience is requested to either type their questions in the chat box or raise their hands through the Zoom feature. We'll be looking forward to questions now. In the meanwhile, we'd like to ask a few questions, Rohit and I, to Mr. Peter. The first one being, sir, did the trial observation in Fiji improve the accountability of the parties for the rule of law?
Thanks for that question, Amani. On balance, in Fiji, we saw the military respecting the Court of Appeal decision, and it agreed to hold, to allow democratic elections to be held. I believe the fact that the world was watching through the international observer, I think that made a big difference. That was partly evident by the fact that subsequently was given the designation persona non grata, it must have had that report, which I thought was painstakingly objective, must have had an impact. But the presence of trial observers helps to instill a culture of the rule of law. And so missions which lawyers undertake, such as trial observations, on balance, improve the accountability for the rule of law.
Thank you, Dr. Peter, for the answer to such a wonderful question asked by Amani. The next question which I want to ask is, what was the value of the training exercise in the East Timor?
Thank you, Rohit. East Timor has gone through ups and downs, as I mentioned, and the lawyers reached out for support. In particular, there was no bar association. And so we went to East Timor to draft the legislation to establish a bar association for that country. In addition, we went through intensive training with bar leaders to go through concepts such as the rule of law, and to discuss the application of human rights within East Timor, and also to discuss their very mission of also upholding the independence of judges and lawyers. And so the value was the drafting, the training, but also installing a beacon of hope to uphold human rights and the independence of judges and lawyers through the Bar Association.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Peter. If you could please elaborate upon the connection of ADR with the rule of law and how they're interrelated in your opinion.
Thanks, Amani. ADR, justice delayed is justice denied. Justice delayed is justice denied. ADR, I call it appropriate dispute resolution, not alternative dispute resolution, because it should perhaps be the first instance in many cases, the first recourse. ADR can not only result in efficient case management, but it can also help to instill a culture of efficient and amicable dispute resolution. That's, I think, very important because many societies and many individuals in societies resort to violence too quickly. So fundamentally, ADR can have profound socio-economic effects. And that indeed is the purpose of IWAM and indeed the summit and other organizations with which I'm associated, to make a significant socio-economic impact through ADR.
Thank you, Dr. Peter, for sharing your views in connection to the ADR and the rule of law. We can see there is one person who is raising the hand from the audience. If you allow, could we ask them to unmute and ask the question?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you very much, colleagues. My name is Donald Dare. I run the Pan-African Lawyers Union based in Arusha in Tanzania, covering the African continent. And pardon me that I'm multitasking in a number of functions, so there's background noise. But I really like the tour de force that you gave of experiences engaging with fellow colleagues from the legal profession, working on the rule of law across various continents. And that you capped it up with having some sort of vision or ideas on what, under the umbrella of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, we could do going forward. Now, one thing you've identified, especially the Fiji story, where in one epoch you can contribute and there's a turn towards the rule of law, but those that fight the rule of law, the soldiers, the men with guns, and they're usually men, not women, can then, a couple of years down the road, reverse the gains. So it just shows that even for us, under the umbrella of the Common Employers Association, we can't do anything. We can't do everything on our own, even when we intervene in particular situations. So my question to you is, what kinds of partnerships do you envision CLA could work with in terms of contributing to the rule of law? And just even within the Commonwealth family of institutions, what are the kind of things that we could do with others that would help kind of solidify the work that lawyers can do, helping each other, expressing solidarity for the rule of law? Thanks.
Thank you for that question, Don. I think I approach that in two ways. One, with working closely with Commonwealth Law Association partners. There's quite an amazing array of very effective, very useful partners within the Commonwealth. And I think we should continue those relationships and strengthen those relationships. For example, in the area of education, and also I'm discussing, one of my proposals is an online institute. I think we can certainly work with everyone from the educational NGOs within the Commonwealth and the Commonwealth Secretariat to the Commonwealth of Learning, which deals with distance learning. And these efforts help to reinforce the human rights and also the rule of law. In addition, there are organizations outside the CLA, outside the Commonwealth, such as the Special Rapporteur of the UN on the independence of lawyers and judges. One should take a look at that possible relationship. As you mentioned in your question, our work isn't over. One has to often return to do the work. It may be a longer process, but we can make a significant contribution. In the case of Mr. Prasad, which was regarded as the most famous constitutional case in the history of Fiji, the military subsequently returned to the barracks but came out again. But recently, there were democratic elections in Fiji, and I'm encouraged by the results. And indeed, that incremental work has added up and seems to have borne fruit. And so, in sum, we can work closely with our partners, both internal and develop partnerships outside, to reinforce human rights and the rule of law. And I'm hopeful that we can do that, so that we can continue to make a real difference in situations such as I've described.
Thank you, Dr. Peter, for the answer to the wonderful question asked by Mr. Donald. Moving ahead, I have a question as a budding lawyer. So the thing which comes in our mind is, how can lawyers become engaged in the practical way in upholding the rule of law? So how we can take it ahead?
Thank you, Rohit. I think I found that many lawyers want to find practical ways and to become more engaged in international law organizations. And so I've mentioned some already, such as trial observations. I also pro bono work. Many lawyers are prepared to do pro bono work around the world, often with the help of a institution such as the CLA. And so we need to find the resources to make that possible. Many lawyers are indeed quite prepared to go at their own expense, using their own resources, as long as there's some kind of infrastructure or framework to do so. There's also the question of training and technical assistance. Lawyers can assist in training and technical assistance to bar associations and more societies. I have proposed an online institute which might provide training to reach the farthest reaches of the Commonwealth where one may not be able to afford to have extensive training. And indeed, indeed, I'm hoping that we can work with one of the law databases to make such an online training institute possible. So here's another practical way that lawyers can help through working through the online training institute. Then working with young lawyers, training. The three things that young lawyers want most are training, mentoring, and networking. And certainly we can work together to provide that, to provide those three things. I had the pleasure to initiate the Young Lawyers Award within the IBA and also the Young Lawyers Committee within the IBA. And I'd like to see such an organization flourish within and it has done very considerable work already. I want to strengthen the conference has been held for young lawyers. I want to strengthen that. And so lawyers can participate in a very practical way by working with young lawyers and with other lawyers around the world. And so I think those are some of the very practical ways. Writing amicus curiae briefs, also, I hope that we can work together with the other stakeholders so that we have a wide array of opportunities where lawyers can participate in a very practical way in upholding human rights and the rule of law.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maynard. Now, we'd like to progress towards the last question. What exactly is your opinion on the world we are progressing into? Is the rule of law, are the challenges increasing towards it, or are we moving towards a more progressive rule of law?
I think, Amani, that on balance, the challenges are increasing compared to decades ago. We can observe incidents, as I mentioned, in the U.S. Capitol, as well as the Brazilian presidential palace. I'm very proud that the CLA has issued statements ranging from interventions in support of a lawyer, Tamika Clark in Guyana, who was arrested after advising a client of his constitutional his right to silence, ranging from that to interventions regarding Justice Lamborn and the Chief Justice in Kiribati. And so the organizations such as the CLA are now important now more than ever. In our current circumstances. And so I expect that as these incidences increase, that our work is there for us, and it's up to us to continue to rise to the challenge. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do that in the coming years.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maynard. I'd now like to give the floor to Mr. Rohit for his closing remarks.
Thank you, Amani. So here comes the end to the wonderful session by Dr. Peter on human rights and rule of law, practical experiences, challenges, and responses. So thank you so much, Dr. Peter, for delivering such a wonderful lecture on the topic. Before I conclude this session, so I would like to thank and invite all of you to join us for the Commonwealth Lawyers Conference, which is organized in the month of March in Goa 2023, from 5th of March to 9th of March. It will be an honor for CLA to host you all there. At last, I would like to thank Mr. Jitendra Mohan Sharma, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court, for the wonderful introduction, and Mr. Santhan Krishnan, the man behind this event. And how can I forget Amani thank you for being such a wonderful host. And at last, I'll thank you all for joining us. It was pleasure hosting you all here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you for a wonderful talk.
Jitendra. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rohit, Amani, and Santan. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.